100 noblewomen competed for giant Viking's hand at feast, but he only wanted slave Maiden. Hundreds of noblewomen from distant lands had gathered, their silks glimmering in the firelight, their jeweled crowns catching sparks from the hearths. The long wooden tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, golden bread, and sweet, spiced wine. Laughter and whispers floated like smoke through the air, mixing with the rhythmic clatter of plates and goblets. It was the feast of the year, the night when every noble hoped to catch the favor of Ragnar Bloodhand, the giant Viking of legend. Ragnar sat at the high seat at the head of the hall, a figure of awe and power. His hair was dark as midnight, long and slightly tangled, and his beard thick, framing a face that was both harsh and commanding. Eyes like storm clouds swept over the crowd, piercing through masks of false smiles. His presence was enough to silence the most confident noblewoman, and yet, tonight, he seemed almost bored. One by one, the noblewomen performed for him. Lady Astrid from the northern fjords sang a song of victory over enemies, her voice ringing clear and proud. Lady Freya, whose silk gown shimmered like morning dew, danced with a grace that made the hall hold its breath. Others recited poems, boasted of family lineages, or displayed feats of skill. Each performance was a desperate plea. "Notice me, Ragnar. I am worthy of your hand." Yet Ragnar's eyes did not stay on the noblewomen. They scanned the room with a quiet hunger, searching for something else, something hidden in the corners where no one dared to look. And there, near the great hearth, tending the fires, stood Ira, a slave maiden. Ira's hands were calloused from work, and her dress was plain, made of coarse wool, with no jewels to catch the firelight. She moved with quiet purpose, adding wood to the fire, stirring the coals, keeping the heat alive for the feast. She did not speak to the noblewomen, did not perform. Her eyes were low, avoiding attention, yet there was a strength in the way she carried herself, a stillness that seemed almost impossible in the chaos of the hall. Ragnar's gaze found her immediately. There was something about her that drew him, something untouched by pride or ambition. In her he saw quiet courage, a spirit that did not bend to the whims of courtly display. For the first time that night his interest stirred, not in gold, jewels, or titles, but in a simple, unassuming girl who had nothing to offer but herself. The noblewomen noticed his glance toward Ira. Shock flashed across their faces. Some whispered behind their hands, eyes wide with disbelief. "Surely he cannot mean her," Lady Astrid murmured to her companion. "She is only a slave." But Ragnar did not look away. Slowly he rose from his high seat, the long hall falling into a hush at the movement of the giant Viking. The noblewomen stiffened, their carefully planned performances now meaningless. All eyes turned to him, yet all he saw was Ira. Ira froze, startled. She had felt the weight of his gaze before, but never like this. Her heart pounded in her chest, and a flush rose to her cheeks. She tried to lower her eyes, to pretend she did not hear the whispers around her, but her hands trembled as she added another log to the fire. Ragnar moved with the quiet certainty of a predator, though there was no menace in his steps. He stopped just a few feet from her, towering above her yet somehow giving her space, respect. The hall was silent, the noblewomen frozen in shock. "Ira," he said, his voice deep and steady. The sound echoed through the hall, carrying over the clatter of the feast. "Come forward." The words were simple, but they carried weight that made the hall shiver. The noblewomen gasped. A slave maiden called before the mighty Ragnar Bloodhand. It was unheard of. Ira's breath caught. She wanted to run, to hide behind the fires, to disappear into the shadows where she belonged. Yet something in his gaze held her. It was not cruel, nor commanding in the way of masters she had known. There was a strange gentleness there, an invitation, not a demand. Slowly she stepped forward, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. Each step seemed to echo in the hall. The noblewomen watched with a mixture of envy and disbelief. The songs and dances of the evening seemed like hollow attempts to earn favor compared to the quiet strength of this girl. Ragnar studied her as she approached. There was a tension in the air, thick and electric, as though the room itself had stopped breathing. Finally, he reached out, not to grab, not to claim, but to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Do not fear me," he said softly. His words were gentle, yet there was power beneath them, a force that could command armies and silence voices. "I have watched this hall all night. They all come seeking titles and treasures, but you are different." Ira's eyes widened and her lips parted, but no words came. She felt the heat of the fires in her cheeks, the pounding of her heart in her chest. She had never been noticed like this, never been seen for who she truly was. The noblewomen whispered among themselves, their envy barely contained. They had come expecting to win him, to dance and sing and charm their way into his favor. But here was a slave girl, silent and unassuming, and he ignored all others for her. Ragnar's gaze softened, yet there was a storm hidden in the depths of his eyes. He had known power and victory, battles and curses, yet he had never felt this strange pull toward another human being. Ira's presence stirred something within him that he did not understand. "Why do you stare at me so?" Ira finally whispered, her voice trembling. "Because you are real," he said simply. "Because you do not pretend. Because you do not hide behind songs or jewels." The words struck her like a spark. In that moment, she realized that he did not see her as a slave, or as property, or as someone lesser. He saw her as a person, a being of strength and heart, someone capable of courage and feeling. The noblewomen tried to intervene. Lady Freya stepped forward, her silk gown swishing, voice sharp. "Ragnar, do you not see the beauty and grace of those who have come to honor you? Must you choose her?" Ragnar turned slowly to face them, his expression unreadable. "I see her," he said, gesturing toward Ira. "And she alone." Gasps filled the hall. Some noblewomen bowed their heads in anger, others in disbelief. But Ragnar's decision was clear. His heart, for reasons he did not yet fully understand, had chosen this girl. Ira felt a mix of fear and awe. She had grown up knowing her place in the world, quiet, unseen, serving others. She had never imagined that someone like Ragnar, someone of such legend and power, would notice her. And yet here he was, offering her a chance to step forward, to be seen, to be more than she had ever known. The hall seemed to hold its breath as the moment stretched. The fires crackled, shadows dancing on the walls, as if the very air of the hall recognized the significance of this moment. Ragnar reached out, and for the first time, Ira took his hand. It was warm, strong, and steady, grounding her even as her mind spun with fear, excitement, and disbelief. She realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The feast, the noblewomen, the songs and dances, all had been a stage. But this connection, this quiet, unspoken understanding was real. Ragnar's eyes softened as he looked down at her. "You are more than this hall, more than these walls," he said. "Come with me. If you wish, step into a world that you have never known." Ira felt her heart swell with a mix of hope and fear. The world beyond the hearth and the hall was unknown, dangerous, and vast. Yet something inside her whispered that this was the path she was meant to take. Slowly, deliberately, she nodded. The noblewomen whispered and murmured, their envy and shock barely contained, but Ira did not care. All that mattered was the hand she held in hers, the warmth and strength of the man who had seen her for who she truly was. As Ragnar led her to the edge of the hall, the flames of the great hearth flickered, casting shadows that danced like spirits along the walls. It was the beginning of a story neither of them could yet understand, a story of courage, destiny, and a bond that would challenge everything they had known about power, love, and themselves. And as the hall fell silent once more, all eyes could only watch in awe. A slave maiden had stepped forward, and the giant Viking had chosen her. The night had changed forever. The morning after the feast, The stronghold was quiet except for the wind that whistled through the tall stone towers. The firelight from the previous night had faded, leaving only the soft gray of dawn. Ragnar Bloodhand stood on the battlements, looking over the frozen fields that stretched like a silver sea to the horizon. The noblewomen had left in whispers of anger and disbelief, their hopes shattered, their songs forgotten. But Ragnar did not think of them. His thoughts were only on Ira, the girl who had entered the hall quietly and yet had claimed a place in his heart with nothing but her courage and her stillness. Ira moved among the servants, carrying baskets of bread and water, careful not to draw attention. She had not slept well, her mind alive with thoughts of the giant Viking who had chosen her over hundreds of noblewomen. She wondered why he had noticed her. She wondered if he would see her again, if she would ever be more than a servant in the great hall. Ragnar, sensing her hesitation, descended the stairs quietly. The hall was empty now, except for the crackle of the last fires. He found her kneeling by a small hearth in the servants' quarters, the faint morning light illuminating her face. "Ira," he said softly. She looked up startled, and for a moment fear flashed in her eyes. She had grown up knowing that men of power rarely spoke kindly to servants. "I did not mean to disturb you, my lord," she said, bowing her head slightly. "You disturb me not," Ragnar replied. "I wish only to speak with you." He stepped closer, his presence filling the small room, yet there was a gentleness to him that made her feel safe. "There is much about me you do not know, and yet, somehow, you see more than anyone else ever could." Ira's heart pounded. I do not understand," she whispered. "I am only a servant. Why would someone like you care for me?" Ragnar's eyes darkened, filled with a shadow of the curse that had followed his family for generations. "Care is not always measured by wealth or title," he said. "It is measured by the truth a person carries in their heart. And you carry truth. You are not like the others. You are not afraid to be yourself, even when no one is watching." Ira felt warmth bloom in her chest, but fear followed quickly. "I am not worthy of you," she said, her voice trembling. "I am nothing compared to the noblewomen. They are beautiful, learned, and brave in ways I am not." Ragnar shook his head, a small, almost sad smile on his lips. "They perform courage. They wear it like a cloak. You live it." He paused, studying her closely. "There is something within you, Ira, something that even I do not fully understand. I feel it and I cannot ignore it." For a moment the world seemed to stop. The morning light streamed through the narrow windows, dust motes floating like tiny stars. Ira looked at him, seeing not the Viking warlord who commanded armies and feared no man, but a man haunted by his own shadows, searching for something he could not name. "I am afraid," she admitted, her voice soft. "Afraid of the world beyond this hall, afraid of the things I cannot see or understand." Ragnar knelt slightly so he was at her level, though still taller by a head. "Fear is not weakness," he said. "It is a reminder that we are alive. It is the fire that teaches us strength. You have more courage than you know, Ira, and soon you may discover a strength you never imagined." She looked at him, her heart full of a strange longing. It was a feeling she had never allowed herself before, a feeling both frightening and exciting. "But what about your curse?" she asked cautiously, remembering the whispers she had heard among the servants. "I have heard stories of your family, of the darkness that follows you." Ragnar's face shadowed with pain. "Yes," he said quietly, "my blood carries a curse. It is old, ancient. The stronger my passions, the darker the storm within me becomes. It has brought ruin to those I loved. That is why I must be careful. That is why I cannot promise you an easy path." Ira's heart ached at the pain in his voice. "Then I will face it with you," she said firmly. "I may be small and I may be a servant, but if there is danger, I will not run." Ragnar's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the courage in her words. Few dared to speak so openly, even fewer dared to offer themselves to share in his burden. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his, a gesture both protective and trusting. If you truly wish to walk this path with me, he said, you must know that it will test everything you believe about yourself. You will face fear, doubt, and darkness. You will be challenged in ways you cannot imagine. I am ready, Ira whispered. If it is by your side, I will try. I will not turn away. Ragnar's hand tightened around hers, and for a moment neither spoke. The quiet of the hall wrapped around them, and the weight of destiny seemed to settle on their shoulders. There was a bond forming, one not built of gold or power, but of trust, courage, and the shared desire to face the unknown together. Days passed, and Ira learned more about Ragnar than she had ever known about any person. She walked beside him as he inspected the fortress, speaking to soldiers, strategizing over maps, and recounting tales of battles long past. He taught her the ways of the world beyond her walls, not with harsh lessons, but with patience and care. And yet the curse remained a shadow. Sometimes in the quiet of the night, Ragnar's eyes would darken, a storm brewing behind them. Ira learned to read the signs, the slight clench of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the way his voice would harden like iron. She knew then that the curse was not just legend, but a living, breathing force within him, one that could erupt in fury or despair if left unchecked. One evening, as snow began to fall lightly outside the fortress, they stood together on the battlements. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and ice. Ira shivered and Ragnar draped a heavy cloak over her shoulders, his hands brushing hers. "You do not need to fear me," he said softly. "I will never harm you, but the world outside, it is full of danger. And I cannot protect you from everything." "I do not want to be protected," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. "I want to walk beside you. I want to face the dangers as long as we face them together." Ragnar studied her, and for the first time he allowed himself a small smile. "You are brave, Ira, braver than any noblewoman who sought me at the feast, braver than I often am myself." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the snow fall. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath in recognition of the bond forming between them. In that quiet, Ira felt a deep, unspoken connection, a promise that neither power nor title could ever break. But not all were content with this unexpected alliance. Whispers of jealousy and intrigue floated through the fortress. Servants and guards alike spoke in hushed tones about the slave Maiden who had captured the heart of the giant Viking. Noblewomen, far away in their distant castles, seethed at the news, plotting ways to reclaim what they believed was theirs by right. One night, as Ira returned from the kitchens, she found a note tucked beneath a stone in the corridor. The words were sharp, filled with venom. "You do not belong to him. Step aside before it is too late." Fear surged through her, but so did determination. She crumpled the note in her hand, then set her jaw. "I will not step aside," she whispered to herself. "I belong where I choose to stand." When she shared the note with Ragnar the next morning, he looked at her with both pride and concern. "There are those who will try to break this bond," he said. "They will not understand why I chose you. But remember this, courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing strong even when fear is present." Ira nodded, feeling a strength she had never known. She realized that her life had changed forever. No longer was she merely a servant, hidden in shadows. She had a place beside Ragnar, not because of her title or wealth or beauty, but because of her heart, her courage, and her unwillingness to hide from truth. And Ragnar, who had known only battles, curses, and solitude, began to see a new path, one where trust, patience, and love might temper the storm within him. The curse that had haunted his family for generations had not yet lifted, but in Ira he saw the possibility of redemption. The snow continued to fall that evening, covering the fortress in a blanket of silver. Together, Ragnar and Ira stood at the battlements, hands intertwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony. They knew the journey ahead would be difficult. The curse would test them. Enemies, jealousy, and doubt would come. Yet in that moment, neither of them turned away from the bond forming between them. It was a bond forged not in gold or glory, but in courage, trust, and the quiet understanding that love, true, enduring love, could arise even in the darkest of shadows. And as the wind whispered through the towers, carrying the first hints of winter storms, both knew that their story had only just begun. The world beyond the fortress was waiting, full of danger, mystery, and challenges that would test every fiber of their beings. But for the first time, Ira and Ragnar faced it not as master and servant, or Viking and maiden, but as equals bound by trust, courage, and a shared destiny. Hook cliffhanger. The first trial of the curse, and of the heart, was about to begin. The snowstorm howled through the fortress, wrapping the walls in a white veil. The wind carried the sharp scent of pine and frost, and the horizon disappeared beneath a curtain of cold. Ira shivered, pulling the heavy cloak tighter around her shoulders. She had never walked in such weather, never faced such wild, untamed lands. Yet beside her, Ragnar Bloodhand moved with ease, his long cloak whipping in the wind, his eyes scanning the distant forests and cliffs as though he could see beyond the snow. "We must be careful," Ragnar said, his voice low and steady, carrying easily over the wind. "The forest beyond is old. It carries shadows that are not entirely human. They test the courage and hearts of those who enter." Ira nodded, her breath visible in the frigid air. She had followed him willingly, leaving the safety of the fortress, because she could not ignore the pull she felt toward him. Fear and excitement warred inside her chest, each step through the snow a trial of courage. The first signs of trouble came in silence. Shadows shifted between the trees, elongated forms that seemed to move of their own will. The snow muffled sound, yet Ira felt eyes upon them, a weight that pressed against her chest and made her stomach tighten. "Stay close," Ragnar said, placing a hand on her back to guide her. "Do not let fear cloud your mind. The forest will test us, but together we are stronger than it thinks." Ira nodded again, and she felt the warmth of his hand seep into her, steadying her nerves. His presence was a shield, but she knew this was not just a test of strength. It was a test of trust, courage, and the bond forming between them. The snow grew deeper as they entered the forest, each step harder than the last. Trees loomed tall and twisted, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching toward the sky. Strange noises echoed, cracks of ice, whispers of wind, and the distant calls of creatures unseen. At first it was subtle, a rustle here, a shadow there. But soon it became clear. They were not alone. A figure emerged from the snow, tall and pale, with eyes like frozen steel. Its presence was cold, unnatural, and the air around it seemed to freeze even further. "You should not have come," the figure said, its voice echoing as if carried by the wind itself. "You, Viking, and your companion, you are not welcome here." Ragnar stepped forward, towering over the figure. "I walk where I choose. Leave or face me." His voice was firm, unshaken by the creature's power. The figure laughed, a sound that carried no warmth. "You carry a curse, Ragnar Bloodhand, one that will destroy you if left unchecked. And you, girl," the figure said, turning to Ira, "do not think your presence will save him. You may have courage, but it is not enough." Ira's heart pounded, but she stood tall. "I may not be strong like him," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "but I will face what comes. I will not turn away." The figure's eyes narrowed. "Very well, then prove it." Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted. Ice cracked, and the snow swirled into a blinding white vortex. Ira struggled to keep her footing, and Ragnar reached for her, pulling her close to shield her from the sudden storm. The wind howled, whipping their cloaks around them, and the figure faded into the snow, leaving only a chilling presence behind. "You must trust me," Ragnar shouted over the roar of the wind. "Hold my hand. Do not let go." Ira clutched his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. Together they moved forward, each step a battle against the elements. The snow was deep, the cold biting at their faces, but neither faltered. Hours seemed to pass as they struggled through the forest, and just as exhaustion threatened to take hold, they reached a clearing. In its center was a frozen pond, smooth as glass, reflecting the gray sky above, and on the far side, standing like a sentinel, was the figure again. "You are brave," it said, "but bravery alone will not break the curse. One of you must face the truth inside yourselves. Only then can you survive what comes next." Ragnar's eyes met Ira's. She could see the shadow of worry there, the weight of the curse pressing down on him. "What must we do?" she asked, her voice soft. "Face yourselves," the figure replied. "Face the fears, the doubts, the darkness you hide even from each other. Only then will the bond between you be strong enough to survive the trials of the forest and the storm that approaches." Ira swallowed hard. She did not fully understand what the figure meant, but she felt the truth in its words. Fear had always been a part of her life, hiding behind walls and shadows, and now she realized she could no longer hide. Not if she wanted to stand with Ragnar, not if she wanted to help him break the curse that had haunted his family. Ragnar's hand tightened around hers. "We face it together," he said. "Whatever comes, we do it side by side." Ira nodded, feeling a courage rising within her she had not known existed. They stepped onto the frozen pond together, the ice creaking beneath their weight. Shadows moved around them, whispering secrets and doubts, testing their resolve. Suddenly, visions appeared in the ice beneath their feet. Ira saw herself, alone and small, hiding in corners, afraid to speak or act. Ragnar saw himself, a giant among men, yet trapped by the curse, unable to love or trust without fear of destruction. The visions twisted and moved, showing every doubt and fear they had ever carried. Ira's hands trembled, but she clutched Ragnar's hand tightly. "We will not let this control us," she said, her voice strong despite the fear in her heart. "We face it, together." Ragnar nodded, his own fear and pain reflected in the ice. "Together," he echoed. The ice shivered and the shadows grew darker, testing their courage. Whispers filled the air. "You are not strong enough. You cannot survive. He will fall. She will fail." But Ira pressed forward, step by step, holding Ragnar's hand. He followed her lead, trusting her courage, trusting their bond. The ice beneath them began to glow softly, a pale light spreading as they faced the fears reflected there. Then a blinding flash of white light erupted from the center of the pond. The figure appeared once more, but now it seemed less threatening, more like a guide. "You have begun to understand," it said. "The curse feeds on fear, on doubt, on mistrust. Together, you can resist it. Together, you can turn it back." Ira looked at Ragnar and he looked at her. In that moment, neither needed words. Their bond, forged in courage and trust, had begun to grow stronger. The shadows around them wavered, losing their power as the light of their courage filled the clearing. But the trial was not over. The figure raised its hands, and the wind rose again, swirling snow and ice into a blinding storm. From the heart of the storm, a shadowy creature emerged, taller than any man, with eyes that glowed like fire beneath the ice. Its voice was a rumble, shaking the very ground beneath them. "You dare challenge me," it growled. "I am the storm, the darkness that has haunted your lives. You cannot overcome me." Ragnar stepped in front of Ira, shielding her with his massive frame. "We will face you," he said, his voice steady, "and we will not let fear control us." Ira nodded, drawing strength from him, from their bond, from the courage they had built together. "We are stronger together," she said. The creature lunged, moving faster than the eye could follow. Snow and ice swirled around them, but Ragnar caught Ira in his arms, leaping to safety. The ice cracked beneath the creature's feet, and for a moment it seemed unstoppable. But Ira, remembering the lessons of the forest, the courage she had found within herself, stepped forward. She raised her voice, clear and strong, calling out the fears that had haunted her life. "I am not weak. I am not alone. I am brave." The creature froze, its eyes flickering with uncertainty. Ragnar added his voice, deep and strong, confronting the darkness within himself. "I am not controlled by my curse. I am not alone. We are together." The light from the ice beneath their feet flared, blinding and warm, pushing back the shadows. The creature roared one last time, then dissolved into the storm, leaving only snow and silence in its place. Ira and Ragnar stood together, breathless, their hands clasped tightly. They had survived the trial, faced the darkness, and emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as a bond that could withstand fear, doubt, and the weight of the curse. As the snow began to settle, Ira looked up at Ragnar. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief and awe. Ragnar smiled, a rare, gentle smile that lit his usually serious face. "Yes," he said, "but this is only the beginning. The curse is not fully gone and others will challenge us. But now we know that together we can face anything." They walked back through the forest, the snow crunching beneath their feet, hearts still racing from the trial. The wind had died down, leaving only a quiet calm. The forest seemed to recognize their courage, its shadows retreating to the edges. For the first time, Ira felt that she truly belonged, not just as a servant or a shadow of the feast, but as someone who had faced fear, danger, and darkness, and had stood strong beside the man she had come to care for. And Ragnar, who had known only battles, curses, and solitude, felt a spark of hope he had never allowed himself to feel. He had found in Ira a strength he could trust, a courage he could rely on, and a heart that matched his own. As they returned to the fortress, the sun began to rise, painting the snow in hues of gold and pink. The storm had passed, leaving the world fresh and new. But in the corners of the forest, shadows lingered, whispering that the trials were far from over. Hook cliffhanger. Its arrival was silent, yet it carried a message that could change everything, foretelling a challenge that would test not just courage, but the very bond between Ragnar and Ira. The fortress lay quiet beneath a blanket of snow, the sky painted in pale gold and soft pink of early dawn. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint smoke of dying fires. Inside, Ragnar Bloodhand paced the great hall, his hands clenched and his gaze fixed on the folded scroll that had arrived with the raven the night before. Ira stood near the hearth, watching him, her heart heavy with a mixture of anticipation and worry. The scroll was written in jagged, ancient letters, a warning from a distant seer. It spoke of a challenge that would demand not only courage and strength, but trust and unity. The final trial to lift the curse that had shadowed Ragnar's bloodline for generations. "The seer says the trial is coming," Ragnar said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years of fear and isolation. "We cannot avoid it. We must face it together, or the curse will never end." Ira stepped closer, taking his hand in hers. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. "We have survived the forest, the shadows, and the storm. We can survive this too." Ragnar looked at her, seeing the courage in her eyes, the unwavering trust in her heart. For the first time in years he felt hope, a fragile, shining hope that perhaps the darkness could be conquered, not by force alone, but by love and unity. They prepared quickly, gathering supplies for the journey the scroll foretold. Their path led beyond the fortress, through valleys and cliffs, to a place whispered about only in legends, the Valley of Echoes, where the curse's origin lay, and where Ragnar would face the final reckoning. The journey was long and treacherous. Snowdrifts and ice-covered rocks slowed their progress, and biting winds made each step a battle. Yet Ira walked beside Ragnar, her hand in his, her resolve unwavering. She had learned courage in the forest trial, and now it was tested anew. Along the way, Ragnar spoke little, but his eyes often lingered on her. In her presence, he felt a calm he had never known, a quiet strength that balanced the storm within him. Ira, too, felt a deepening connection, a sense that they were bound not only by circumstance but by choice and shared courage. At night, they camped in the shelter of rocky cliffs. Fires burned low and shadows danced across the ice. They shared stories of the past. Ragnar spoke of battles, of loss, and of the curse that had haunted him since birth. Ira shared her life as a servant, of small acts of courage and kindness that had kept her alive and strong. "You have lived with fear your whole life," Ragnar said softly, staring into the flames. "And yet you are braver than anyone I have known. You have taught me something I thought lost forever, the meaning of trust and hope." Ira's fingers brushed his. "And you have taught me to believe in myself. I was small, afraid, invisible, but with you I see that courage can grow, even in the darkest places." Their hands intertwined, and the warmth between them seemed to push back the chill of the night. For a moment the world outside the fire disappeared, leaving only the quiet bond between them, unspoken but stronger than any words. When dawn arrived, they continued their journey, descending into the valley. The wind was colder here, carrying a strange hum that seemed to echo through the rocks and snow. The valley was silent, almost too silent, as if the world itself were holding its breath. At the center of the valley lay a frozen lake, its surface smooth and dark, reflecting the pale sky. And standing on its edge was a figure unlike any they had seen before, a spirit born of the curse, its form shifting like smoke and shadow, its eyes glowing with a cold fire. "You have come," the spirit said, its voice echoing across the ice. "To end the curse, you must face not only the darkness in me, but the darkness within yourselves." Ragnar stepped forward, his hands clenched, his presence commanding. "We do not fear the darkness," he said. "We face it together." Ira moved to his side, her hand brushing his arm. "Together," she echoed, her voice steady. The spirit raised its arms, and the air shimmered with cold energy. The ice beneath their feet cracked slightly, revealing dark waters beneath. Visions appeared on the surface of the lake, reflecting their deepest fears and doubts. Ira saw herself failing Ragnar, powerless and small, unable to protect him or herself. Ragnar saw his curse manifesting in terrifying forms, his rage uncontrollable, destroying everything he loved. "Fear and doubt are the chains of the past," the spirit intoned. "Break them and the curse can be lifted. Fail and darkness will reign." Ira took a deep breath, meeting Ragnar's gaze. "We will not fail," she said. "I trust you and I know you trust me. That is stronger than any fear." Ragnar nodded, feeling a surge of strength from her words. "We are stronger together," he said. "And the curse will not control us." The visions on the ice swirled violently, trying to overwhelm them, but they stood firm, hands clasped, hearts united. Each step forward was a choice, not of strength alone, but of trust, courage, and love. The spirit's form grew larger, more menacing, its voice a roar of ice and wind. "You cannot resist. You are bound by the curse." Ragnar and Ira stepped onto the lake together, moving slowly, carefully, never letting go of each other's hands. The ice trembled beneath their feet, but the warmth of their bond seemed to spread outward, pushing back the cold and the shadow. "Face it," Ira whispered. "Do not run, together." Ragnar closed his eyes, letting her words fill him. He faced the storm of the curse within, the fears he had carried alone for decades. And as he did, he felt Ira's courage and love strengthening him, a light that could withstand any darkness. The ice beneath them glowed, a warm golden light spreading across the lake, illuminating the valley. The spirit shrieked, the shadows dissolving in the glow of their courage and unity. Slowly, the figure of the curse began to fade, leaving only silence and the soft crunch of snow beneath their feet. Ragnar opened his eyes, and for the first time, he felt the weight of the curse lift. The storm within him was quiet, the shadows receding, leaving clarity, hope, and the warmth of love he had never allowed himself to feel. Ira smiled, tears in her eyes. "It is over," she whispered. Ragnar pulled her close, holding her as the wind carried away the last remnants of darkness. "No," he said, voice full of awe. "It is only beginning. The world is still full of danger, but now we face it together." They returned to the fortress, the journey back filled with quiet peace. Snow fell gently around them, covering the world in a soft white blanket. The noblewomen and servants alike watched in awe as the giant Viking and the slave Maiden returned, not only unbroken, but transformed. Inside the fortress, life resumed, but nothing was as it had been. Ira was no longer a shadow among servants. She was a companion, a partner, and a heart that had touched the legendary warrior. Ragnar, who had known battles, curses, and solitude, had found something stronger than power, trust, hope, and love. Days passed, and the bond between them grew stronger. The curse was gone, but its memory lingered, a reminder of the trials they had faced and the strength they had found in each other. Together they began to shape the world around them, leading not with fear or domination, but with courage, wisdom, and compassion. One evening, as the sun set behind the fortress, painting the snow in gold and pink, Ragnar and Ira stood on the battlements, hands intertwined. The wind carried a promise of adventure, of challenges yet to come, but neither feared them. They had faced darkness and emerged stronger. "Do you ever wonder what might have been?" Ira asked softly, resting her head against his shoulder. Ragnar shook his head, a gentle smile on his lips. "No," he said, "because this is more than I could have imagined. We are stronger together, and whatever comes, we face it as one." The sky darkened into twilight and the first stars appeared, shining like tiny beacons of hope. Ira and Ragnar watched in silence, hearts full, knowing that their story, one of courage, trust, and love, would become legend, whispered through generations. And in the quiet of the fortress, beneath the snow and the stars, they stood together, unbroken, their hearts entwined, ready for whatever the world might bring next. Hook closing emotion.